It's 10 years now since the rest of Europe discovered that another European country, Romania, has tens of thousands of children being kept in appalling conditions in state-run nurseries. There was an instant outpouring of sympathy and offers of adoption. While the overwhelming number of adoptions from Romania are legal, the rules were tightened again only last year, it's one of the more melancholy facts of life that for every general impulse of human compassion, there's a small minority willing to exploit it. The European Union has now warned Romania that it had better clean up the racketeers abusing the adoption system there if it wants to stand a chance of joining. Our special correspondent, Sue Lloyd-Roberts, has been investigating the illegal adoption racket.
On the outskirts of most towns in Romania, you find a casa de copii, a house of children. They're often understaffed and bursting at the seams, with young boys and girls desperate for attention. Only a small minority of the 140,000 children in state institutions are who we would describe as orphans. Most of them have been abandoned by their parents. I asked the director how many of them here had parents. She said she didn't know. Their papers had been lost. There are many such children in Romania today, without proper adult supervision, without known identities, and therefore vulnerable to exploitation. The villages of Romania are among the poorest in Europe, not helped by the insistence by former President Ceausescu that every woman should have at least 5 children. Birth control was and still is largely unheard of. The country is poorer today than it was even under the previous regime. And then and now, parents say they still take their children, whom they can't feed, to the local orphanage. At first, everyone thought we were here to buy a baby. When we told them we were investigating illegal adoptions, we were immediately referred to a house, which was little more than a ruin, on the edge of the village, and to a grief-stricken father.
I took the children to the orphanage so that they wouldn't die. They would have certainly have died if they'd stayed here in the village. They never came back. They said the first child was sick. With the second child, I yelled at the director, "Let me see my boy." She told me he wasn't there. He had gone away. To a foreigner like you. What could I do? She didn't give me any money, not even to reimburse my journey to the orphanage.
The orphanage is an hour's drive away in the town of Câmpulung. While the majority of adoptions in Romania are carried out legally, the critics say it's because the adoption business has been privatized in Romania that you get illegal practices, like the orphanage at Câmpulung, which I'd been warned is little more than a baby shop charging inflated prices. Using a secret camera with a translator, we paid a call. If you adopt a baby legally through the British and Romanian authorities, it can take years, it would cost about £2,000, and a baby is selected for you who is a genuine orphan or who has been genuinely abandoned by his parents. Telling the director, Dr. Babush, that I was a wealthy woman who wanted to choose a baby, she showed me around the orphanage, in between taking calls on her mobile phone. Such access is forbidden in Romania. She never asked to see my papers. Maybe she assumed I had permission from the UK. There were 60 or so babies here. They all looked clean and fed, but all shared the rocking motion of babies suffering from neglect. She offered me 3 boys to choose from. I asked whether their mothers had given their permission.
We have all the old files, with addresses, signatures and everything. We'll forge the signature. Who on earth will check? We buy the parents some cardboard rolls to cover the roofs of their houses, bread, a few bags of corn flour and so on. They never complain.
So are you saying I simply stay in England and await the baby?
No.
She said yes, and so that I could have the baby by this summer, she explained that she would have to bribe local officials and that the official foundation through which all adoptions must go in Romania would expect $15,000, and she would welcome a similar sum for her orphanage's needs.
If you like them and want them with all your heart, you will have them.
Dr. Babush has enough friends among the local police, medical and government officials to be able to operate effectively. Her One of these people agreed to talk to me anonymously.
When a child is left at the orphanage, it's their policy not to tell the parents that they must visit the child at least once in 6 months. Otherwise, they automatically lose their parental rights and the child becomes the responsibility of the authorities. The very day after the 6 months expire, the legal papers are always ready to establish abandonment. Mothers have said that the police have forced them to withdraw their complaints, to shut up or there will be trouble. And of course some mothers are happy to produce babies for Dr. Babouche, children to order.
Mr. and Mrs. Preboy are some of Dr. Babouche's most trusted suppliers. Because they produce healthy babies and they don't cause trouble, the doctor pays them $1,000 a baby. They've given 6 children to Dr. Babouche, and the mother showed me photos of her twins now in America. I was still posing as someone wanting to adopt a baby, and the father was keen to impress me.
The director knows when we have had a new baby, and she takes it to the orphanage and keeps it separate, so it doesn't catch any diseases. She gives the baby better clothes and better food. We've had no problems with her. She's taken care of all our children.
But this is the main source of income. He said yes, producing babies is their main source of income. They suggested I take baby Nico back home with me. As they began to bargain, I began to realize what people mean when they talk about Romania's industrialization of the womb. I made my excuses and left. We headed towards Bucharest, where I'd heard that it's even easier to buy babies, and a friend showed me that the best place in the city to buy was around the courthouse. Within half an hour, we were offered 3. This gypsy woman offered us her sister's child. Another gypsy offered her as yet unborn baby. She said it would be her 9th, and she simply couldn't afford to feed another. This man explained that babies weren't his business, but when I said I was prepared to pay a lot of hard currency in cash, he asked me to meet him later that night. Konstantin brought with him a 4-year-old girl. 100. He said he wanted to check the notes of the $10,000 I was to give him, then he'd prepare the papers and the girl would be mine. I turned my back on the 7th child I had been offered in Romania in as many days. It was now clear that people are desperate to sell, but how do they get on when they try getting the child abroad? I arranged to meet a young newspaper journalist who, with the temerity of youth, has exposed what he calls the international adoption mafia in Romania. His main target has been the woman who is generally recognized as the chief trader in babies in the country, Elena Bustea. How big is her business?
I've asked around and heard that the amounts range between $10,000 to $20,000 per child, plus the money needed to bribe people. With that kind of money, she can afford to buy protection. And every year, she handles adoptions for some 300 to 400 children, so her profit over 10 years could be $30 million.
I telephoned Elena Bustea and repeated my story that I was rich but divorced and probably considered too old to adopt, and so I didn't have the essential permissions from the UK. She asked me to come round the next day and she said she would help me, but by the time I arrived, she changed her tune.
In Romania, we must respect the law as the Romanian law. It's normal here in Romania, and after that we cannot do anything for you because you must have all the documents from your state, from where you come to adopt in Romania.
But some foreigners who get to deal with Elena Bustea regret it, especially in Italy and in Spain, where, with these countries' falling birth rates, there are fewer controls than in Britain. Like Signor and Signora Mantiani, an Italian couple, they went to Romania and met the girl they were told they could adopt and spent a month with her. They paid $18,000, but the child never arrived when they returned to Italy.
We hope they will stop this business. They shouldn't be allowed to mess with young children and to deceive people. They showed the same child to 8 or 9 couples, but obviously only one was lucky enough to adopt the child. But they took money from all the couples, and that's why she has lots of money and power over there.
This couple too paid money to Bustea and never got their child. They asked to remain anonymous because they'd received threatening phone calls from Romania. The Italian police are now investigating theirs and several other cases. And there are the young victims of what people call the adoption mafia, like Peter Mustafa, who lives with temporary foster parents in Romania. 2 years ago, she was to be adopted by an American family. She still has the photos of her prospective parents, but it fell through because her identity had been stolen by Elena Bustea. We traced her parents, who told us that when Peter was born 5 years ago, like many parents, they decided they couldn't afford to keep her and they were approached by an agent.
He said he would give me $100 for the baby, and he took her birth certificate. But he gave back the baby, kept the birth certificate, and never gave us any money. So we put her in an orphanage.
Since then, Peter has never seen her parents. She's been abandoned twice in her short life and now has no hope of being adopted.
The records show that a girl of the name of Peter Mustafa had already been adopted by a Spanish family. Her name had already been used. I never thought I'd see something like this. It's very painful to see that there are people who trade in children's souls.
The case was referred to the Bucharest Police Organised Crime Prevention Unit. I went back to our Stefan, who has now been told by his bosses that he can no longer write about Elena Bustea, whether the police have investigated.
Though we have had a succession of governments, no one has ever touched this woman. At a point, all police investigations have had to stop. It's obviously a forbidden subject. Romania's image abroad could suffer if there's evidence of an organized network that's selling children.
I arranged to meet one of the 2 police officers who, while investigating Elena Bustea, were demoted from the Criminal Investigation Department and put back on the beat. But he changed his mind about talking to me. He said he was on the verge of a mental breakdown over the whole business, and anyway, to keep his job, he would need permission from the Ministry of Interior, which he clearly would never get, according to Romania's former Prime Minister.
Once I knew that the 2 police officers were on the case, I contacted the Interior Ministry, but although I gave the investigation my full backing, the officers were taken off the case. I think, although I cannot go into detail, but based on what is being said about the woman who owns this adoption business, I think that these people enjoy protection at the highest political level.
You say the investigation was stopped at the highest level, but there is no higher level over a Prime Minister, apart from the President. Did it come from there?
You can draw your own conclusions regarding at which level this intervention came.
The habit of dumping babies was formed under communism. Once the horror was revealed, the West stepped in with usually good intentions. Sadly, this collision of cultures has left some of Romania's most vulnerable children the victims.